Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman, Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Monday, January 29th, 2018, and we are ready to roll and on the air. The kids are home. It is a movable holiday for the school system. That's what they used to call teacher work days. I mean, the teachers still work. I don't know why they don't call it that, but that's the name they adopted, movable holiday. And allegedly, it can actually move if, I don't know, weather interferes or whatever. I suppose if it snowed this morning, they would just say school's closed. And that would be that. But okay, it's a movable holiday. That's all you really need to know about it. I've never seen it move. But kids are home to rattle around in the background today. A little trouble at the Netroots Radio network today, too. It turns out there is some sort of, I don't know, we all have a virus. There's some sort of technical fix going on, and apparently it's affecting more than just Netroots Radio, but plenty of other streaming services available, thanks to Justice and to Bill in Portland, Maine, for putting the word out on that one. If you, well, I don't know, I guess if you're tuning in now and saying, what, no Netroots Radio, where do I go? You might have missed our morning tweets, and you wouldn't hear us saying that you can listen on TuneIn and a few of the other platforms that stream our show live. And let me see if I can't just flash back a second to what Justice had suggested for those things. Let's see, Stitcher, Winamp, and TuneIn, I understand, all up and working, so hopefully you have already gotten that message and you are there listening live. And if not, well, welcome to the podcast. How you doing? This is the way most people listen to the show anyway, and it makes no apparent difference in the way we put the show together, so let's move on from that. Plenty to catch up on from the weekend. Still got that frog living rent-free in my throat. I should just start upping the price on that. Daily Co's Radio is live now, and the aforementioned Bill in Portland, Maine lets us know today is Free Thinkers Day. I didn't even know that that was the case. There's a day for everything. Did you know that Saturday was National Chocolate Cake Day? I did not know that until late in the day. And I was very upset that there even was a National Chocolate Cake Day. I don't know how they got the big chocolate cake is just lobbying and slicing off bigger and bigger chunks every year. It's crazy that there should be such a thing. And, of course, it's important, though, to remember the downtrodden cakes that people hate. It's one of the most persecuted cakes in America, right along with Christian cake, I guess. And we're glad that they've set this day aside. And we even had a local restaurant that was giving out free slices of delicious, delicious chocolate cake on Saturday. The days are very often shared by more than one cause, and I don't know if you can really even call chocolate cake a cause, per se. That's when it gets really ridiculous. But today's Free Thinkers Day. That's good news. It's dedicated, Bill says, to those who reach conclusions based on facts, reason, and logic. Or, as your host, hi, me, David Waldman, KagroX on Twitter. That's how you can reach me, by the way. As I say, as I call it, a day ending in Y. Very nice. It's nice to feel appreciated that way. Reason, facts, logic. Get all you can today. Load up like carbohydrate loading before a big marathon. Tomorrow is the State of the Union address. So I do see people out there inoculating us against the garbage we're likely to see. Of course, we all anticipate Trump, let's say, doesn't vomit or poop or fall down, although, you know, any of those things is certainly possible. We've just not yet seen it in a real-life State of the Union address, and that will make him presidential. He will have pivoted. That will be the day he truly became president. Totally different story about his lips. That could be a completely different entity. They may give their own State of the Union speech. In fact, they might even demand time to respond to the State of the Union speech on Netroots Radio. Yes, we could give them the time, and we should just bring it. That's it. My impression of Donald Trump, you know, lots of people appreciate it, but maybe what I can say, for liability purposes, just so nobody gets sued here, it's not Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump's lips having jumped off his face finally, and they're speaking their own mind. on the show. I don't know. By the way, with respect to responses to the State of the Union, I understand we have a Kennedy lined up for that, and I've seen, well, a little bit of grousing, a little bit of enthusiasm for the Kennedy himself, that he apparently gives a pretty good speech. But, when it comes to highlighting rising stars in the party, et cetera, as they like to do sometimes with these responses, one, it's a bit of a Sports Illustrated cover curse very often. And two, maybe somebody who represents one of the larger constituencies in the Democratic coalition that really needs to have a clear sign that they're being taken seriously and included, as opposed to for one thing, Kennedy's, and for another, white male elected officials, yada yada. It's not a offensive choice on the merits of it. Is he a good speaker? I don't think we're going to be disappointed by the speaking, but I want to at least note the fact that there are folks out there who are saying, maybe a black woman would be a good choice or something like that. And I don't know whether we're ever going to be making our assignments that way. Where's my, okay, come on now. Where's my pop-up menu? Here we are. Bring me to Skype. This is good music, though. We should just keep this on. As long as Netroots Radio is down, what's the difference? People can't hear it anyway, unless they're listening on TuneIn. Good morning, Greg Dworkin. How'd you like the extra ring time today?
I loved it.
All right. It's a new feature
it's such
of
a
the
catchy
show.
song, but then I worry that maybe something's not popping up on your side, or
it isn't.
Something's turned off, or something.
No, I'm not certain exactly what this is. Although this is the new latest annoyance from, I don't know, I guess from Skype. Normally, when Skype goes active like that, it pops to the front. The window that Skype is in pops to the front, and this one doesn't. And it being a Mac, finding your toolbar at the bottom is a matter of just bringing the mouse down. So I'm bringing the mouse all the way down, but maybe tomorrow I'll show you the toolbar, it says. So,
maybe.
Anyway, we got it. We have a new phone system operating in the background, so hopefully it's
good.
Silenced properly, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah, complaints to Panasonic if it doesn't go right.
Jinx. So the thing is, Joseph Kennedy, who represents the 4th District in Massachusetts. That's one of those weird, funny-shaped districts.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I'll give you the Wikipedia so you could take a look at it. It stretches all the way from Boston to the Rhode Island border.
That's like 10 feet.
Yeah, well, it's
very small here in the East.
But it's a very funky-shaped 10 feet. So it includes Hopkinton and Milford and Norfolk and Attleboro, but also, I guess, parts of Brookline.
I see. Oh, boy. But I mean, the stretch is to Boston. That's like it just touches it.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
But anyway, he's well regarded there and seen as something of an up-and-coming star in the Democratic Party. On the other hand, he's a Kennedy, and people are sick of dynasties. And on the third hand, there's plenty of folks who are getting tired of voting for people over 60. So, a little of this, a little of that. I think all of that has to be put into perspective in that, generally speaking, whoever does the State of the Union response generally does poorly after.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I had likened
Marco
it
Rubio's
to
water.
Yeah, that's true. Although we have Republicans to compare to, but even so, even previously,
even Democrats.
Yeah, I mean that does happen. Although I have been thinking, as a lot of people have, I think, about the few years toward the end where there were like 19 responses allowed from Republicans, because one was the Tea Party, one was Tea Party Express, the other was teaparty.edu, whatever.
But it's a different dynamic now. I mean, the whole thing about those...
We don't get that.
Well, because Obama was president and looked presidential, and that wasn't really up for debate. Whereas now you have Trump, and looking presidential compared to Trump is not tough.
I guess that's true. Well, but still, I mean, don't they want to cast around for... You'd think the TV networks would say, we need somebody presidential. Well, that's what it says right here in our contract.
You know what they should do? Not cover the State of the Union. I mean, the whole thing is so stupid. And
I don't watch.
This whole thing about I don't either. I got a new thing to watch instead, which is an old thing. I got
American Ninja Warrior.
No, I sent away for old copies of The Prisoner.
Oh,
with Patrick McGowan.
That's
and
what
I
you'll
got
be
this
seeing.
Cute little book that goes through episode by episode, chapter by chapter, explaining what the heck is going on. So,
that is helpful.
For the first time in 35 years, I'm going to watch it in the correct sequence, which wasn't shown in the U.S.,
right,
with some of the episodes that were left out of the U.S. So I could finally understand what the heck is going on. There's only 17 episodes total. And whether it's that or Faulty Towers or maybe Blackadder, I always liked Britcoms and British series, even the original Avengers with Patrick Macnee and Emma Peel, Dame Diana Riggs. She's Dame Diana now. Those are a lot more fun than watching the State of the Union. And you know what's going to happen with the State of the Union is that, as you pointed out, no matter what he does, Dana Bash and and others are going to say, oh, my goodness, this is just like totally presidential. He's finally become president, and he's done that pivot. And I don't understand why the media feel obligated to do that, but apparently they do because they do it every single time. John Weaver, who I think is an ex-advisor to John Kasich.
Oh.
I get my advisors mixed up sometimes. Sometimes it's a McCain staffer. Sometimes it's a Kasich staffer. But that's the wing of the party that is still resistant to Trump. So Weaver says, caution, Trump will read from a teleprompter at the State of the Union. It'll be passable, though extreme, yet members of the mainstream media will once again say he's turned the corner, he's met the minimum threshold, etc., and normalize his behavior. Don't fall for it, not for 1 second. I know that, you know that, but cable news is a different story altogether. And Tom Brokaw will come out and say, oh, this is finally what we needed. People need to listen to Trump's respectful, inclusive speech and just try to talk to him. Just try to talk to him.
Just try to talk to him.
Just try to talk to him.
I see.
Instead of all of this partisan bickering.
Yes.
It's one of those both sides things that the media just cannot free themselves from.
Right. And then he'll try to kiss you, and you'll write an article about it. And
Brokaw? I don't know.
Okay. Well, this thing, it happens every year. And
Amy Walter says Soto's State of the Unions are always overhyped. But given deeply polarized electorate in Congress, I don't know of a time when the disconnect between what Trump says on Tuesday and what actually happens in 18 has been larger. So my comment on that, it's actually a media mirror. We get to see how media covers an incompetent and corrupt president reading from a teleprompter. Sounds so presidential, knowing what's behind the curtain. And it's really jarring.
Yeah. It's very distressing, and there's people already putting out the warnings about it. They will be ignored by media types, of course. I don't know what excites them so much about writing that story. It's actually quite tired.
Right, and you know they're going to do it, and you can do it before you even or instead of watching it. And it doesn't really matter. He can read from a teleprompter. He has shown that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean what he says is something he believes or is true or is inspiring or is worth paying attention to.
That is, well, yeah, that's true.
What he does
it's always true,
is far
really.
more important than what he says. Don't ever pay attention to what he says. He is a liar.
Yes.
Well, now, if you had the headline, Liar Gives State of the Union, that would be a good way to cover it.
That would be exciting. This one, I mean, worse than usual. I rarely watch or try not to watch State of the Union addresses straight live, mostly because even presidents who aren't liars, it's sort of boilerplate stuff. Sometimes there's some nice rhetoric. People who are speech-giving fans enjoy them and enjoy evaluating them. But, for the most part, this is where you say what you really hope happens in the next year.
Right. I mean, it's the whole thing. It's to lay out budget priorities, which may or may not actually happen. And so it's kind of interesting to say, okay, that's something he considers a priority. We already know what Trump considers a priority. And it doesn't matter because other than white supremacy, everything else is whatever Paul Ryan told him, and he could change his mind in the next 10 minutes.
That is also true.
I mean, don't be looking to this to decide how he feels about immigration in DACA. That's ridiculous. We know how he feels.
Yeah. I mean, well, don't even look to what he says in an unguarded moment where he says what's really on his mind, because it might not be.
I'm willing to make concessions on immigration, he'll say in this speech. And Steve Miller's laughing and saying, yeah, he'll make concessions to go away from a bipartisan approach to my approach.
Yeah, well, that may be. I guess the only parlor game left for this State of the Union is whether the approach from people like Stephen Miller will be, let's try and slip in the rhetoric we'd like to hear to excite the base, or should we play a game here and slip in the rhetoric that will excite the press corps, and we all laugh, into our sleeves while it's going on, saying they're going to praise him to the heavens tomorrow, and then we'll go about business as usual and not do any of those things, but we'll buy ourselves a week or two of, good reviews and good graces to do some more damage.
A much more fun game would be to write the speech for him and say, here at least are the elements that he should cover. Here's one element that I don't think he'll be covering tomorrow, but he ought to. It's by David Leonhardt, and it's in the New York Times. It's called An Article of Impeachment Against Donald J. Trump. It'd be nice if he dealt with impeachment during the State of the Union, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Can we hack the teleprompter?
Let me lay out for you clearly the reasons why people think I need to be impeached. That would be a wonderful speech given by Donald Trump, read from a teleprompter as if he believes it. But what David Leonhardt writes is there are good reasons to be wary of impeachment talk. Congressional Republicans show zero interest, which is why we have to replace them, by the way. And they're the ones in charge, which is why we have to replace them, by the way.
Right. Two good things.
Democrats, for their part, need to focus on retaking Congress. Oh, look at that. He agrees.
All right.
Railing about impeachment probably won't help him win votes. Well, it will in Massachusetts' 4th District.
Oh.
But let's set aside realpolitik for a few minutes and ask a different question. Is serious consideration of impeachment fair?
Yes.
The answer is yes. The evidence is now quite strong that Donald Trump...
I know it just happened.
my Siri just came on and said, here's what I looked up under impeachment.
Yeah, serious. Yeah, I had to turn my Siri off of the phone because it does that all the time. Every time I say seriously.
Yeah. Oh, that's what it is. Okay. So if you mention the SIRI word, it comes on. And then they go
didn't think that through.
No matter what I ask, they always try to find the latest Yankee score. So it never finds stuff good. But here it is. Let aside, is it serious to consider this fair?
Yes.
And the answer is yes.
All right.
Another jinx. The evidence is now quite strong that Donald Trump committed obstruction of justice. Many legal scholars believe a sitting president cannot be charged with a crime. So the proper remedy for a president credibly accused of obstructing justice is impeachment.
All right.
Right?
Although I'd charge him with a crime.
The first article of impeachment, well, it's unclear whether or not presidents can be charged.
Yeah, I know, but
they can be impeached.
One, does he know?
He doesn't know anything.
Two, would he do it, even if it was
three,
unclear?
If he gave him a speech that said, here are the articles of impeachment against me, and
I
they're
would
really
have
strong,
to just do that.
would he read it?
Right.
Right off the teleprompter without knowing what it was.
Right. His lips would surrender.
Right. The first article of impeachment against Richard Nixon argued that he had prevented, obstructed, and impeded the administration of justice. One of the two impeachment articles that the House passed against Bill Clinton used that identical phrase. In both cases, the article then laid out the evidence with a numbered list. Now, there are people in this world who really like lists. We talked about this a long time ago.
That's true.
The steps 1 through 10 people, we like to call them. And it's important. It's important that you lay these things out. Nixon's version had 9 items. Clinton's had 7.
Should have had 10.
Each list was meant to show that the president had intentionally tried to subvert a federal investigation. So let's give the list here.
Okay.
During a dinner at the White House on January 27, 2017, Trump asked for a pledge of loyalty from James Comey.
That's one.
On February 14th, Trump directed several other officials to leave the Oval Office so he could speak privately with Comey. He then told Comey to let this go. 3. On March 22nd, Trump directed several other officials to leave a White House briefing so he could speak privately with Daniel Coates, the Director of National Intelligence, and Mike Pompeo, CIA Director. Both of them, by the way, were very partisan Republicans who did not approach their jobs as being above the partisan fray America First approach, even though they're America Firsters.
Yeah, weird that.
Trump asked them to persuade Comey to back off investigating Flynn. Number 4, In March and April, Trump told Comey in phone calls he wanted Comey to lift the cloud of the investigation. 5, on May 9th, Trump fired Comey. And then on May 10th, Trump told Russian officials the firing had taken off the great pressure. And then on May 11th, he told NBC News that the firing was because of this Russia thing.
Right.
Get the impression it's a Russia thing, So that's up to 5. Number 6, on May 17th, shortly after hearing the Justice Department had appointed Mueller to take over the Russia investigation, Trump berated Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General. The appointment had caused the administration again to lose control over the investigation, and Trump accused Sessions of disloyalty. Parenthetically, the whole problem here, as someone wrote, is that Trump still doesn't understand that he can't run the government the way he ran a private business. 7, in June, because everybody knows the best thing to do is to appoint businessmen to government, right? Because they just know how to do things. Here's a perfect example of why that's an awful idea. Number 7, in June, Trump explored several options to retake control. At one point, he ordered the firing of Mueller. Let me repeat that. He ordered the firing of Mueller before the White House counsel existed. 8, on July 8th, aboard Air Force One, Trump helped draft a false public statement for his son, Donald Trump Jr. The statement claimed that a 2016 meeting with a Russian lawyer was about adoption policy. Trump Jr. later acknowledged the meeting was to discuss damaging information the Russian government had about Hillary Clinton. All of these are facts that are being laid out here. Number 9, on July 26, in a tweet, Trump called for the firing of Andrew McCabe, the FBI's deputy director. Number 10, throughout, Trump, and the quotation comes in the Nixon article of impeachment, made false or misleading public statements for the purpose of deceiving the people of the United States. In other words, he's a liar. Among other things, Trump repeatedly made untruthful statements, in other words, he's a liar, about American intelligence agencies' conclusions regarding Russia's role in the 2016 election. So there you have steps 1 through 10, and there happen to be 10 of them. So that fits.
That is a record. I am the hugest, most impeachable guy ever.
Right. Obstruction of justice depends on a person's intent, what legal experts often call corrupt intent. This list is so damning because it reveals Trump's intent. He's inserted himself into the details of a criminal investigation in ways that previous presidents rarely, if ever, did. They left it to the Attorney General. You remember, Nixon would send John Mitchell or Haldeman or Ehrlichman to go do the dirty work. When the framers were debating impeachment at the Constitutional Convention, George Mason asked, "Shall any man be above justice?" The same question faces us now. Can a president use the power of his office to hold himself above the law? Trump is unlikely to face impeachment anytime soon, or perhaps anytime at all. We have to win the House at least before we even get there. But it's time for all of us, voters, members of Congress, Trump's own staff, Kagro in the morning, says so right here.
Me, yes, all right, excellent.
To be honest about what he's done. He has obstructed justice, and he may not be finished doing so either. I think that's the most important part of the day.
Well, that's a lot to consider, of course.
And so he's standing up there giving the State of the Union, and people are going to say, "Oh my, how presidential!" He read from a teleprompter.
Yes.
Again, when you know what's going on behind the curtain, it's just really jarring.
Yeah.
To see people do this because it doesn't work. And you scratch your head, and instead of saying, "Gee, that worked or didn't work," you scratch your head and say, "Why are you doing this?"
Right. And he doesn't have to, by the way.
So why is the media doing this? Why does Dana Bash go up there and assume in advance, she does because she does it every time, "Oh, that was a really great speech. It was so presidential. Hit all the right notes." Yeah. Why are you doing that?
Well, it has always been
he's a liar.
Close to true.
Just laid out.
Yeah. I don't know. That's just habit, and I can't believe that that's really it. I mean, you would think that this would be a very exciting time for journalists. Think of all the new things we could be writing about the tired subjects. Right. As opposed to, let me run the story I ran last year and erase Obama and put Trump's name in there. I guess that's easy, but it seems like a boring thing to do. And
Look at all the scandals: tan suits, feet on desk, didn't wear a tie. Remember those days?
Yes, all those horrible things. Not including none of them were, by the way, baseball cap in the Oval Office, and that didn't come up for some reason. But maybe it was because we were on a break. The government was shut down, so it's okay. This
is a fascinating piece by a conservative writer who now is a politics editor. Her name is Catherine Miller.
Okay. Yes.
Over at BuzzFeed News. Yep. Donald Trump, Me Too, Facebook, and the breakdown of institutional power. You got that one?
Yeah, and we're not supposed to be like, "Oh, hey, she wrote something great." She did a good job with this one. This is very interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The phantom feeling that something should have happened but didn't or won't flows through each of the central stories of the moment. Trump's presidency, the nightmare revelations of sexual abuse, and that includes Michigan State University, by the way.
Yes.
And the accumulating problems of Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, that is to say, infiltrated by the Russians. What institutional power looks like in 2018, and just catalogs a failure of institutions to do anything about it. And what Trump has done is expose the weakness in a lot of these institutions. And she writes, that's produced some nostalgia from all different sides for back before, when a political party might change the rules on a candidate or the media could more tightly control what viewers saw and heard. But these are also the same kinds of institutional controls that made all Harvey Weinstein's accusers go away for so long. And that realization, the way institutions made bad things go away, links a lot of these kinds of stories. A very interesting thesis.
It is very interesting, and it's a well-done thing, and I don't usually turn to Catherine Miller for things like that, but it's very wide-ranging and comprehensive and deep. It's quite an interesting thing. I think I might want to read through the entirety of the article. So why don't you go ahead and do it, and I'll take a nap. Well, we have a break coming, of course, but...
Okay, well, let me just do stuff right before the break here.
Okay, you got your 30
If you read
seconds.
all these stories and start writing down for calculating out the ages of the people in them, the interns, assistants, desk assistants, and students, especially the women and men whose names you've never heard before, a pattern emerges. We were so young at the time. Karen Katz, who worked at Weinstein's Miramax, told the Times. We didn't understand how wrong it was or how we should deal with it.
And that's the essential element in all of it. It's a very interesting article. We'll take a second look at it perhaps in the second half. But for now, a 2-minute break. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and we are actually on Netroots Radio. I found out during the break, or just before the break, Jack Ox 48, who has called in via Twitter a few times, says he's listening on the Netroots Radio feed, and it's just fine, so that's good news. I guess all the work is over, and it's been a success. The operation's been a success. The patient is saved, and we get to continue. Podcast, live, or any way you can imagine it. So let's see, Greg... When we finished up on the Catherine Miller, or the teaser of the Catherine Miller. We may talk more about that one. It's a very good article, and I think everybody should take a few minutes to sit down with it. I was waiting for it to turn back to Catherine Miller land, and it really never did. So, credit to her. She didn't sound anything like herself.
Huh. So let me give you a quickie, and then we're going to turn to a fake scandal and a real scandal.
That would be a scandal. Go ahead.
All right. So the quickie is that Julie Beisowitz, writing on Twitter, says some $200 million later, the Kochs turned the page on health care repeal. They're not going to fund repealing the health care thing anymore.
Oh, why not?
At least for now. And Larry Levitt from Kaiser Family, the expert who we turn to all the time for healthcare news, says it's starting to seem like repeal of the individual mandate penalties as far as Congress will get towards repealing the Affordable Care Act for now. However, still keep an eye on administrative efforts to weaken the health law.
All right.
And my observation about that is that it's also a comment on how much Republican donor money drives their agenda. If the Kochs decide they're not going to repeal health care, all of a sudden Republicans in Congress decide they're not going to repeal health care? How does that work?
Oh, yeah. 10-year crusade here. And then.
But okay, whatever.
We're going to do it.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Right. Well, we care about the budget. No, we don't.
No, we don't.
We're moral people and upstanding porn stars, whatever.
So I'm going to give you an article here from New York Magazine.
Thank you.
Written by Paris Martineau.
All right. Well,
which describes something I had seen float by on Twitter, but scratched my head and say, what is this? I don't fully understand.
That's my life.
Okay. And it's about a scandal. You know about the Release the Memo scandal. We've talked about that on the show. And
yes, I finally did catch up.
Familiar that Devin Nunes is threatening to reveal for everybody to see that the Justice Department and the FBI in particular were actually pursuing crimes when it comes to the Trump administration, and somehow that's a scandal.
Oh, I didn't even realize, but okay. I mean, I knew there was something there. But...
Right. If he wants to release that, fine. He's going to cherry pick a whole bunch of stuff without revealing sources and say, look, the administration, you remember way back when Trump was first president and he said something about they wiretapped me and that was garbage? They're going to basically build on that.
Oh, well, will they spell tap correctly?
I don't know. As long as I spell his name, any publicity is good publicity, I suppose. But right. That one you know about. Release the Memos is something that perhaps the listening audience is familiar with. Did you know about the storm?
No, but I think I have. Here we go. There it is. I have the sound effect, which of course you won't be able to hear, but people are newly able to hear on the Netroots radio feed. So okay, a little bit of thunder, lightning, and dramatic music there.
Okay. So the storm is the new Pizzagate, only worse.
With toppings.
Yeah. A new conspiracy theory called The Storm has taken the grimiest parts of the internet by, well, storm.
Oh, well.
Like Pizzagate, the Storm conspiracy features secret cabals, child sex trafficking ring led in part by the satanic Democratic Party, and of course, countless logical leaps and paranoid assumptions that failed to hold up under the slightest fact-based scrutiny. However, unlike Pizzagate, the storm isn't focused on a single block of shops in D.C. or John Podesta's emails. It's much, much bigger than that.
Well, that's good.
Play the music.
Oh. Well, I can, but you won't be able to hear it.
Right, I'll just play it.
All right.
It's like...
I could play anything. You don't know.
Right.
This is really... Now there's some possibility here. All right.
Every time you say, Frau Blucher's name, the horse's name, right?
Right.
As most terrible things do, this story begins with a post on /Paul/ a subboard of the more or less anonymous Anything Goes website 4chan.
Okay.
Over the last few years, Paul, which technically stands for politically incorrect, has slowly but surely become a top contender for the ever-coveted title of the most upsetting community online. It's the sort of place where neo-Nazis and people who believe women shouldn't have basic human rights used to meet before we started verifying them on Twitter and electing them to public office.
Okay.
I like the article. That's one of the reasons I'm reading. And as of late, it's expanded its ranks to include fringe members of all shapes and sizes. Now, on October 28th, somebody calling themselves Q.
Oh, that's nice.
QAnon. Q began posting a series of cryptic messages in one of those threads titled Calm Before the Storm. Assumedly in reference to that creepy Trump quote from early October, Q claimed to be a high-level government insider with Q clearance, hence the name. He wasn't the Q on Star Trek who knows everything. Tasked with posting intel drops, which he for some reason called crumbs, straight to 4chan in order to covertly inform the public about POTUS's master plan to stage a counter-coup against members of the deep state.
Oh, boy.
So this is a deep state thing here. Just so you know, that's what the storm is referring to. It was, in short, absolutely insane. However, thanks to some rather forced coincidences, like Q kind of sort of guessing that Trump would tweet the word small on Small Business Saturday, and he probably also tweeted business. This one time, the internet decided that Q was totally on Air Force One because he posted a blurry picture of some islands while Trump was on his trip to Asia. And a whole heck of a lot of wishful thinking. People started to believe he was the real deal, so he kept talking.
Okay.
So according to Q, Trump was never really involved with Russia and isn't actually under investigation by Mueller.
Oh.
On the contrary, Q insists it's actually Clinton and Obama who were corrupted by Putin and are now actually under investigation by Mueller. Because they're obviously just evil, money-hungry globalists who will do anything for the highest bidder. Oh, yeah, and they're also apparently into raping and killing children, though the crowd is split over whether this is because they're Satanists or just part of some weird blackmail scheme involving the CIA. It's not clear there. Right?
I could imagine the confusion.
I mean, it's easy to get confused about those sorts of things. Q also claims that Trump, the genius that he is, figured all of this out way back when he was just a measly presidential candidate and has been pretending to love Putin and be involved with Russia ever since as a way to force a third party to investigate these horrors without drawing the attention of those evil Democrats who must not be named, of course, because he's just that selfless of a leader. In this fantasy world, all of the far right's wildest dreams come true. Q promises that Clinton, Obama, Podesta, Avedon, and even McCain are all either arrested and wearing secret police-issued ankle monitors or just about to be. That the Steele dossier is a total fabrication personally paid for by Clinton and Obama. The Las Vegas massacre was an inside job. And it's connected.
What?
It's connected to the Saudi Clinton cabal.
Oh.
And
Saudi.
Yeah, all right. They believe all of this will be coming to a head any day now, that the storm of arrest, political turmoil, Republican vindication is coming.
Okay.
Of course, just like the end of the world, some miscalculations as to exactly when.
Oh, well.
And then they give details.
That happens with end of the world stuff.
But I just thought I would explain to you what the storm is when you see reference to it.
Okay. I hope I don't.
So Trump really is not being investigated by Mueller. Mueller's actually investigating Clinton and Obama for colluding with the Russians and the Saudis and somehow this, that, and everything else, and then the next thing you know. Okay, but the only problem with that is that if that's true, why would Trump fire Mueller?
He didn't, so he's right. Maybe. That sounds like a good work.
Right. I mean, if you actually pay attention to the news, you'll find what I just read to you somewhat confusing. But if you only live on 4chan, then you'll still find it confusing. But at least maybe, I don't know, that's all you hear. So
yeah. Now, if you write an article like this, then 4chan takes it and says, see, we've...
It's writing all about it.
Either that...
Verify.
Or you can say, yeah, well, there's that angle. Or there's the other one where they smirk to themselves and say, see, we made the normies believe that we believed that. We're so manipulative, we can do anything. And, I mean, somebody just wrote our entire article laughing at the insanity of it. But we made the normies believe that we really believed that. And that's the best troll of all.
Whoever you are. As if I pay attention. I just wanted to know what the word was. Okay. Now that I read it sounds like something out of Alex Jones. Thanks, bye.
Yeah.
That's what you wanted? Fine. You got that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't even rise to his level of professionalism, I think.
Right. But okay. You know, when you see references to the storm or calm before the storm, at least you'll know what it is.
Yes. For all the good it does you.
Yeah, for all the good it does you. That was a fake scandal.
I like it. Okay. But you have a real one.
I do, unfortunately. And, you all know that Michigan State is having some issues, and U.S. Olympic Committee and the USA Gymnastics Board has all been forced to resign. And this is over the serial abuse over decades of girls and women who are gymnasts. Michigan State has some other issues, apparently, that are being worked out in regard to some of their other teams. So,
yeah, he was a doctor there for almost all their athletics.
Yes, and the piece by Catherine Miller talking about institutions and their failure may well be looked at in that light. But Larry Nassar was a doctor there, a doctor of osteopathy, and he did practice, and he was part of the Olympic movement for many years, and everybody looked the other way. And he abused the kids, and then they ratted on him, as they should. They finally had, the wonderful, and I have a lovely piece about that from Jen Rubin, Distinguished Persons of the Week, Unimaginable Courage and Grace, talking about the victims who were finally, able to get their story heard. But the fact of the matter is, Nassar did those things, and because media is what it is, that is to say, it'll take Donald Trump's lies and try to pretend he's being presidential, and it tries to sanitize everything. They haven't really in detail talked about what Nassar was actually doing. And that's why I found it so incredible to read this Virginia Heffernan piece in the L.A. Times.
L.A. Times, okay.
The Los Angeles Times. About what Larry Nassar was doing. The title is Dr. Larry Nassar Was Not a Doctor. The 156 women who spoke in open court this week chronicling Larry Nassar's 20-year career as a sexual predator seethed. They were unsparing. They were implacable. They were also brilliantly sardonic. With icy contempt, they pronounced the oily phrases that Nassar and his enablers used to groom, manipulate, and stigmatize them. Nassar was advertised to them as a, quote, miracle worker and, quote, a knight in shining armor. His sexual assaults were a medical procedure. But the survivors reserved special disdain for one word, doctor. What kind of doctor can tell a 13-year-old they're done growing by the size of their pubic bone? Doctors do no wrong, only heal. And, so on and so forth, over and over and over. And I just thought it was interesting that she actually went to the trouble of kind of documenting what it was he was doing.
Yes,
they go through his career, which is important. In 1993, he received a doctorate in osteopathic medicine from Michigan State University. And then Michigan State, of course, went on to protect and pay Nassar, the almighty and trusted doctor, as a faculty member for 20 years. And, I myself am a doctor, so you can and I'm a pediatrician, and you can imagine how offensive it is to have Nassar use that term. I totally get where they're coming from. Lou Anna Simon, MSU's president, resigned this week amid charges that the university covered for Nassar and enabled him, which is true. I mean, they had complaints going back a decade that they did nothing about. USA Gymnastics, where Nassar also passed as a doctor, is similarly accused of giving safe harbor to a known criminal while hushing and deceiving his victims. Under pressure, the group announced this week the entire USAG board would resign. Then they go on and talk a little bit about osteopathic medicine and how it focuses on the joints, muscles, and spine. These days, if you're a doctor of osteopathy working, let's say, at a hospital, there's basically no difference between your training and allopathic medicine, which is the traditional MD. So this is not a knock on osteopathic doctors at all. But historically, if you go back over the ages, and of course medicine had some weird stuff they used to do as well, depending upon how far back you go. Historically, though, osteopathy, its original name, was closely associated with a set of esoteric massage styles that some researchers now consider ineffective or worse. For its part, MSU's College of Osteopathic Medicine still teaches these unusual manipulations, a special benefit unique to osteopathic medicine, describing them as a form of hands-on diagnosis and treatment. So for some historical context, Andrew Taylor Still, the founder of osteopathy, wrote of his medical discoveries in 1897, I could twist a man one way and cure flux, shake a child and stop scarlet fever, cure whooping cough in 3 days by a wring of the child's neck. Which is true. If you wring it hard enough, the kid stops coughing.
I guess that's true. It's just it has other symptoms.
Yeah. Modern osteopathic medicine uses none of these techniques to treat infections or anything else. Good. But the specter of violence and child abuse that Still conjured in his early writings continues to haunt the fringes of osteopathic medicine. These practices include intravaginal manipulation, or fisting. This was the medical procedure that Nassar performed on so many young girls. They actually came out and said it, and when you read that, you go, I get a better sense of why everybody was so upset.
Yeah, I mean,
because he was calling this medical manipulation, and you also get a sense. Let's just put yourself for the moment in his shoes.
No,
I don't know if you want to do that, but the outrageous defense of what he was doing as being legitimate is infusing the letter he wrote to the judge about how I have to sit here and listen to this that the judge just sort of threw away.
Yeah.
You may read that episode. But, you get the sense that he actually sort of convinced himself that what he was doing was like medicine.
Oh. Well,
that's part of
that it's very, I mean, I got the sense clearly of what was going on from some of the sentencing phase testimony from the victims. But
this actually comes out and says it in the print, in media, and when you read it, if you're not outraged, there's something wrong with you.
Well,
victims, Nasser's attention wasn't on their hamstrings or the ACLs. He focused on other body parts. In January 2017, one victim spelled it out in her complaint, and I won't read it, but I just want to give you an idea that it's in there. And then came the gaslighting. When the girls blew the whistle, Nasser and his enablers tirelessly reasserted his privileges as a doctor. We were manipulated into believing that Nasser was healing us as any normal doctor is supposed to. And in this particular testimony, she refers to him as Mr. Nasser rather than Dr. Nasser.
Okay.
Just last year, the American Osteopathic Association released a statement to MLLive.com, the Michigan news service, saying that intravaginal manipulations are indeed an approved, if rare, osteopathic treatment for pelvic pain.
Oh,
you don't need to check that. It's not
rare. All right. I hope it's
not
like rare, like non-existent.
Right. So Nasser's story may seem like an outlier, but it's only the latest entry in the master narrative of our time. A powerful man, abetted by a syndicate of sponsors and enablers, what you might call, as Catherine Miller does, institutions, commits a violent or sky-high crime, and then moves heaven and earth to conceal it, deride those who expose it as fake news, and smear the victims and whistleblowers. Trump, Putin, Ailes, O'Reilly, Weinstein, Wynn, Nasser.
That is
In April, following his arrest 4 months earlier, Nasser's medical license was finally revoked. His vocation is now lifetime incarceration. He is no longer a doctor, and as the women have proposed, he never was.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing, and you read that and say, okay, remember all those people saying, oh, the judge wasn't nice to him?
Yes, I do.
After reading this article? Really?
Yeah, well, yes. It's a rather amazing thing, and I hope that clears things up a little bit.
So, I mean, it's the last I want to hear about the judge wasn't nice to him. 175 years? I was like, 5 times too short, maybe?
Well, it won't make a difference.
But,
it's wow.
Put it on and make him understand he is never getting out.
I mean, I don't know. There's a lot that I don't fully understand about the case, but holy cow! I can't imagine.
You don't get the sense, the whole big picture of what he was doing from most of the sanitized discussions about what was going on. They use every term to try to avoid telling you what he actually did. And, it's okay for them to show the outrage of the victims. But you need an article like this to really bring home what the heck was going on.
Although, now my inquiry is, I guess, other people at MSU and in gymnastics, like, did any of the patients get better? Whatever problems they were actually having, and then whatever he decided was going to be treatment. Did anybody get better?
Are you saying they all had pelvic pain? Did he publish his results?
Yeah, I mean,
his study. I mean, what's going on here?
How many of our?
Is there any review whatsoever? Did he bill for this? Is there a code for that?
He did bill for it. That I understand from some of the other articles, that there are still victims are still getting past due notices. The MSU is billing them for his treatments.
So, are you outraged yet?
Well, money.
On top of everything else, now it's billing them for this and saying
now I'm mad. Yeah, I'm on. This is the Fox News Business Network.
Right. Anyway, I just it's not something you usually hear, and it's not something you usually read, and I complimented the author for actually bringing it up to the public's ability to at least digest some of these. And of course, what we did on the air is a relatively sanitized version of the article, and the article is a relatively sanitized version of what actually happened.
Yeah, there were some other complaints made that are that are more graphic, but they're more understandable as what I think is more clearly the sort of sexual abuse you hear about in other cases.
And you kind of compartmentalize in your mind and you say, okay, one of those. I get that. Okay, fine, enough. But what he was doing was a different level altogether.
Yeah.
Calling it medicine, believing it's medicine, getting some institutional backup for calling it medicine. And that, to me, is what I find so outrageous.
That is pretty amazing. And billing for it on top of it all.
And billing for it on top of it,
and
right.
I assume hurting people worse. I mean, minus the psychological damage, which is worth 175 years and more all by itself. I'm sort of stunned that people who were hurt would go to him and not come out. I guess they did come out more hurt. And, why, how do you miss this? I mean, even if you somehow discount the idea of the reports of sexual abuse because we understand that people are reluctant to believe that about a respected figure for whatever reason he's respected.
Weinstein,
why isn't
Wynn,
MSU?
Trump, and Trump doesn't skate on this.
No,
this isn't what Trump was doing. But, when you have somebody in power who is a serial abuser, it's just interesting that everybody else but Trump up until this point, has had their comeuppance. And when you're president, you can do these things, right? When you're a racist, they let you get away with this stuff.
I guess he must believe that. It doesn't sound like it makes any sense, but he certainly acts like he believes it. Well, I don't understand. I mean, even MSU takes its athletics seriously. Why weren't they upset that all their athletes were hurt?
Because they treat the athletes like meat, and there's always another to replace them.
I guess there's that. And then
there's
was
scandals
women.
in some of the other departments at MSU as well.
I assume did no men ever hurt their hips or pelvises at MSU?
I guess he wasn't their doctor.
I guess not. All right. Well, I don't know. I find the whole thing bizarre, of course, but I guess I'm glad to have some light shed on it. So
here's the Detroit News.
Oh?
The report turned the spotlight on football and basketball, led by iconic figures Mark D'Antonio and Tom Izzo, and how those programs dealt with sexual assault allegations. It framed Michigan State athletics as an insular enterprise, uncooperative and non-transparent when athletes were accused of crimes. So, again, a lot more going on. Different, but there's going to be a lot more. I mean, MSU is going to turn out to be Penn State with a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to involve the entire school. And it's no surprise that the head stepped down. It isn't just this. It isn't just this department. It isn't just the girls.
Yeah, or I guess at some point they just say, well, what will we do about Nassar? And the answer is, well, just take the playbook that we use when one of our male athletes gets in trouble and apply it to Nassar. Just say it didn't happen, or we'd like to, evaluate his performance in the office different from outside. That's not our responsibility. But all this was happening in the office, so, Well,
what you need is somebody from outside going in and taking a look. Because the institutions themselves are going to protect the institutions. They're not going to be looking after the rights and the protection of the victims.
Yeah.
And whether it's the Catholic Church, whether it's the White House, whether it's Michigan State, you need these outside groups looking in, because it's the only way you're ever going to get some truth and justice done. Anyway, I think I'll leave you with that, but that's the overall larger picture here. You got another hour to go. Maybe you can
I'm
look
done.
at Catherine Miller's, look at institutions and how they failed us.
Maybe I quit. This is it. All
Okay.
right. All right. Well, what do I say? Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Sorry. And then you get to listen to Trump tomorrow. So
yeah. Well, I won't.
This is the background for all of this, and this is why the skepticism.
Maybe we could put this on his teleprompter.
Yeah. Maybe he'll comment on it. Maybe he'll comment on impeachment, and then he'll have another section about sexual abuse, like at MSU, and then he'll talk about people being disenfranchised and not being allowed to vote, and how Wisconsin isn't even going to let people vote if seats come up, and how the Republicans are trying to game the system. That'd be a great State of the Union to give, and then he could say, and we're going to fix this all and just make things right.
Just kidding.
Right at the end, he says, just kidding. Forget it. You all owe me.
All right. Well, this will be some State of the Union, and I'm sure it'll be presidential and awesome.
I'm sure it will, and I'm sure Dana Bash and And other people will tell us, in fact, that is, in fact, the case. So with that, I'm going to leave you with this very cheery first hour of Kagro in the Morning. This is Greg Dworkin speaking to my good friend David Waldman, who's now all bummed out.
Yeah.
But, it happens. Suck it up and, let's move forward. Take care, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Okay.
But he did say the State of the Union.
Yeah, right. We'll figure that out. And
we'll have read about it by then because we're not watching.
Right. Someone will send me a clip.
Right, exactly. Take care.
Thank you. You do the same, and we'll check in with you on Wednesday post State of the Union and an actual State of the Union, his first. Remember that we reminded everybody last year that a president's first address to a joint session of Congress under the current tradition, because these guys all think that the president is supposed to come and speak to a joint session of Congress, and it's mandated somehow by the Constitution. Early in February, the new president's going to do it, but of course they have no idea what the State of the Union actually is. They've only been president for a matter of weeks. So they are invited to give a speech to a joint session, but they don't call it a State of the Union address, which is just a weird little oddity because everyone treats it like a State of the Union or even refers to it as a State of the Union. Maybe we should just do away with it. But those are the sorts of little details that make this show fun. And we got to sound like we know what we're talking about. I know this. We have another break coming up shortly, and well-deserved. We'll have to kind of absorb this Nasser story. It is really rather amazing. And I don't know. I mean, what kind of outside people do you put in to do this investigation? I'm heartened to hear about the forced ouster of the entire USA Gymnastics board. That sounds somewhat promising. I learned from the testimony of some of the gymnasts there that they consider the board to be rather ineffectual and disconnected from the actual practice of the sport anyway, and I imagine there are probably few easier tasks than finding people qualified and good enough and well-intentioned enough to fill the board of USA Gymnastics. Right among our gymnasts, they've probably all been dying to do it. We'll be right back. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and it seems we really are definitely on the actual Netroots Radio. We have more confirmations than just Jack's now that it's all up and working, and so that's a special bonus for live listeners. Hopefully there are a few of you out there who were listening to the show early on and said, what are you talking about? And I guess besides Jack, I don't know. I tweeted out the notice that there was something going on over at Netroots Radio. And I don't know, maybe at that point you panicked and ran over to TuneIn, and you welcome to it. I hope you're enjoying what's going on over TuneIn or Stitcher or Winamp or any of the other alternative live streams. But everything seems to be A-okay, so that's good news for us and John McCain, which is always the case. So let's see, where were we with all of this? Look at this. Bill has a comment about the horror dramatic. We have two dramatic pieces here because we use so many sound effects on this show. You can imagine we want to occupy two slots on the soundboard with dramatic music. We have regular dramatic, major key dramatic, I guess. And I don't know, maybe that's not major key. And minor key dramatic, horror dramatic. And I don't really understand enough about music theory to say with any confidence whether I know what I'm talking about at all with the major key, minor key. I don't know. But anyway, it sounds like a very important sounding. The horror dramatic is, in fact, a sound capture from Young Frankenstein, or Frankenstein, if you pronounce it correctly, which you might not care to do. The dramatic one, I don't know where we got that from. I think we might have taken that one from the dramatic hamster meme that circulated on the internet 12,000 years ago. But Young Frankenstein's part here. Bill says FYI, which I always find a fun phrase. But for your information, it always strikes me as like, well, for your information, because you're too dumb to know it already. That's not what Bill is saying. It's just a psychological problem on my part. I'm going to get over it. I promise. FYI, John Morris, the guy who composed the music for Young Frankenstein, where your thunderclap music comes from, died over the weekend at 91. So for that, I guess we have the other sound effect. I don't know. We don't have much for do we have anything sympathetic about when people die? I don't know. I don't think I have any. I don't have any good death sound effects. I have near-death sound effects. That's Armando driving down the road and speaking to us on the phone. But there are some other things that I think would be ironic to play, but wrong. He has died at the age of 91. Why do people whose music you play on your show keep dying? That is a good question. Of course, the Justice is responsible for the first instance of this. And do we have any other music? I mean, there's some. We use some royalty-free music elsewhere in the show and during the breaks. As far as I know, the composers of those pieces are dead. Maybe it's the royalties that do it, or maybe they've already kind of died the death. Oh, my music is being used royalty-free. I might as well be dead. I don't know. Well, that's an interesting tidbit. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. I like to know things like that. I prefer it when the people are still alive, but still now I know who composed the music, at least. However, it did take him a very long time in between even not only composing it, but even our initial use of it for them to die. So it's like slow poisoning. That's the show. We'll slowly poison you to death. Okay, so there's a couple things we wanted to catch up on. How and in what order to approach them is the only question. And the only answer I can give you is I want to go over to that Catherine Miller story because I think it's, well, I know it's longer than what Greg read you, but it was really kind of, I liked it. It was very 50,000 foot view sort of thing. And as far as I read into it, I never had that moment where I was like, okay, there's Catherine Miller that I know and don't like very much. Not personally, per se. I don't know her personally. But I was surprised at how deep into the story I was able to read and continued to say, yeah. And I guess that's supposed to be the case for Jennifer Rubin these days, too. And woke Bill Crystal, although I'm able to read all of them with a grain of salt. Yeah, but I disagree with you on so many things, but that's okay. It's a good time for that. I disagree with you on X, but this is good. I'll take it. So what was the title of the piece? Again, it's for BuzzFeed, where she's now writing, having moved over from, I think, some really like super crappy conservative places. I forget exactly where else she has worked, but you won't like them if I list them. Donald Trump, #MeToo, Facebook, and the breakdown of institutional power. Remember, this was a very lofty thought piece. The phantom feeling. This is the subheader Greg read to you. The phantom feeling that something should have happened, but didn't or won't, flows through each of the central stories of the moment. Trump's presidency, the nightmare revelations of sexual abuse, and the accumulating problems of Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. What institutional power looks like in 2018. And it is illustrated with a photo of Trump in Davos, which is, of course, formerly known as the World Economic Forum. Remember, we were puzzling last week over what do they actually call that thing anyway. And by the way, he's sitting there and doing that same gesture that he does when he's sitting alone in a chair in the middle of a stage or any place in the Oval Office, and he doesn't know what to do with his hands or there's no table. He does what one writer once described as the vagina sign. He makes that little weird triangle with his hands, and he dangles it in front of his crotch, which also, by the way, frames his extraordinarily long ties, usually dangle right into that. And he sits there. I don't know. It's a very weird, unpresidential posture, to be honest. He's sitting in a chair, scooched forward, hunched over, knees apart, hands in that triangle between his knees, pant legs riding up on both legs, gigantic tie dangling down. And the vapid stare, I think, is probably the most disturbing feature, besides the lips on Donald Trump. The lips are like a life of their own. These incredible fish lips, always trying to escape his face. Why do you make us do all the lying? And then, but the vapid stare and the puffy eyes, I can't stand the guy. I admit it. And I'm sorry that I have to keep telling you that. Let's get to the story. Donald Trump has an unusual kind of power. He reveals weakness. That is an interesting way of putting it. And by the way, did I put away this other? There was another interesting article out there that I might not have put aside because I eventually decided it was too irritating. But somebody described Trump in their article as the freest man alive. And I don't know whether that was supposed to be like, conservative type freedom, or whether it was a little bit of both, like tongue-in-cheek as well. But he was the freest man alive in terms of, like, this guy does not understand that there are any limits. He does whatever he wants, and he laughs in the face of all consequences, apparently. Although he may not be laughing like, look how devious I am. He's laughing like, I don't know even why I did it. But whatever, you can't catch me. I am able to convince people that I'm rich enough to escape consequences. So that's that. Anyway, we'll stay focused for a moment here. I'm sure there'll be plenty of tangential comments coming up in this piece. So what was his unusual kind of power? He reveals weakness. This quality he extends to all things, people, traditions, movements. And while you know all this by now, the way he traffics in lingering doubts, for example, Lion Ted, about Ted Cruz, and the malleable dignity of those around him, in all the small compromises people make with themselves toward an end, what all these individual shortfalls do in the aggregate is to expose the fragility of our modern national institutions. Big theme, by the way, across all of the media in the last couple months, maybe the whole entire year, certainly right now. Everybody talking about how fragile American institutions really are, how much they've depended on trust, honor, shame even, and how none of them are codified either. And it's very hard to charge anyone with their violation because there's no crime involved. It's just outrageous. What exactly, for instance, she continues, is supposed to happen if the president wonders why we accept immigrants from S-hole countries, or says a group of white supremacists included very fine people, backhandedly calls the North Korean dictator short and fat? And that's the essence of it all right there. That's a great question. What is supposed to happen? We're all supposed to react in horror, and the president's supposed to backtrack or apologize or whatever, or certainly, if he doesn't, then he would resign or be impeached. But nothing does happen because there isn't anything. Although that's a theme we've been stressing for a long time on a number of fronts, not just Trump. For many years, well before Trump, we had to stress the fact that, laws very often not self-executing. You violate them, but it takes action from others. We have to decide to do something about it before there's a price. Even just, the most basic, everybody understands it to be illegal stuff. Murder. A person gets killed. It's not automated, artificial intelligence, robot cops don't swoop down from out of nowhere, or judges and just throw you in jail. There's a whole process. The body has to be discovered. They have to file a case. They have to prove things, whatever, or even in our own usual context, in politics, where it makes more sense to us, somebody does something unconstitutional. Well, until a case is brought and makes it all the way to, wherever it stops, and if it's the Supreme Court, great. But very often we find that they dismiss cases on jurisdictional grounds, standing grounds, etc. Right? You do something that we all thought was unconstitutional, but no court seems to want to touch it. What happens? What's supposed to happen? We don't know. So, what's supposed to happen if all these things go on? S-hole countries, white supremacists, calling North Korean dictator short and fat. Nothing. Of course, there is no institution. I'm going to expand the contraction here. There is no institution to guard against any of that. Nothing formal anyway, right? And since there's no way to quantify the harm in any of it, there's no way to quantify the harm either. No laws were broken, no physical destruction. All these things that President Trump says just land in a weird rhetorical DMZ, demilitarized zone, for those of you who don't remember that acronym, where there is no recourse. That unease defined the last year. And it's this kind of phantom feeling that something should have happened, but didn't, or won't, that flows through each of the central stories of the moment. Trump's presidency, the nightmare revelations of sexual abuse, and the accumulating problems of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the fake news, the Russian bots, whatever you want to call it, the porn star sex. What brings all these things together is the assault from the White House and from journalists, for better or for worse, on core institutions. With Trump, it's like constantly watching a fly ball fall between a shortstop and a left fielder. That kind of suspended anxiety free fall where nobody really knows what to do because there's nothing to do. Morning in America is disorientingly open with possibility because who knows where Trump will take things next. It's oddly riveting, George Saunders wrote during the campaign nearly 2 years ago, watching someone take such pleasure in going so much further out on thin ice than anyone else as famous would dare to go. Nobody ever decided whether that dynamic drove or hindered Trump's success. But what it definitely did was expose the extent to which the American political system was relying on shame to keep it in check. There's that word. Trump constantly subverted the expectation of what a normal candidate would do. E.g., she says here, apologize for accusing Judge Curiel of bias based on his Mexican-American heritage. I don't know, did she even name the John McCain thing? He's not a hero. All of this. Remember when that was the end of it? Oh, he's done now. Think about that in his second year of his presidency. So Trump constantly subverted the expectation of what a normal candidate would do by never conceding any mistake. The idea generally is that campaigns, like corporations, are basically built to apologize, walk back, and or preemptively manage expectations so that the minimum number of voters take offense at any given thing. Trump rejected that framework entirely, but stretched the understanding of what was normal so far that there was a sense, a flame that apparently burns eternal, that some objective imagined hand of authority, the Republican Party, or the RNC, or the delegates at the convention, or I'll add the Electoral College, conveniently left out of this one, would step in. The FBI, anything. No one did, because the uneasy reality is that candidates and their own campaigns alone govern the candidate and the campaign's conduct. If you're unafraid of the public's distaste, there are a lot of places you can run with that. Basically, if a candidate says, well, listen, I'm going to do this and you can't stop me, maybe you actually can't. Trump, then, is like some classical Greek Shakespearean character sent to reveal that weakness in the system. An interesting thought, no doubt. But at this point, I guess I'm reflecting on the last couple of lines there. I like that one just a little bit earlier. The uneasy reality is that candidates and their own campaigns alone govern the candidate and the campaign's conduct. One of the things you run into very frequently, if a campaign that is overtly built on the concept that I will lie about whatever I need to lie about in order to get elected. Now, he didn't come out and say that, but it was damn near admitted. Certainly, anybody who watched what was being said and understood the dynamics of what was being said knew that was the case. But no, he didn't come out and say, I am lying to you right now. But that's why one of the major themes of really astute political cartooning during the campaign was stuff along the lines of that famous New Yorker cartoon of the wolf out in the billboard of the wolf politician out in the sheep meadows. I will eat you, right? And the sheep's talking. He tells it like it is. Says, I don't know. It seemed to work, but that's a good point. Very frequently you hear about all this stuff, or we give Pinocchios out for everything, but there's no consequences to just lying your crazy ass off during the campaign, because the only thing that can hurt you about it is having people call you on it, and then having a base that cares. And if you don't have that, it's not the FEC is going to step in. They usually don't anyway, but even if they tried to do it, they're deadlocked, and so they've been removed as an official voice in policing campaigns since the beginning. Really, honestly, what ends up happening is if you violate campaign finance laws outright, I'm taking Chinese money direct from Xi Jinping and selling sponsorships on my suit, whatever it is. All the things that you can imagine that would be completely out of bounds. What happens? They don't say, all right, FEC, timeout, campaign over for a minute, official timeout. We are removing you from the campaign. You're too big of a liar, and you are stealing too much money. You are no longer the candidate. We're going to stop, get another candidate, and start this campaign season over again. Now, the actual practice is, and this is largely because no one ever conceived of candidates and campaigns just abandoning all pretense of telling the truth or following the law. I guess now we're having a better, an easier time of imagining that. But what ends up happening, you run the campaign, and who cares? I stole all my money, and I lied all the way through it. The point is, there's a large number of people in the country who believe my lies, and don't care where the money came from. And if they go to the polls and mark the ballots, pull the levers, whatever, for me, I win. Now, afterwards, the FEC can say, aha, now, good, I'm kind of glad you won, because now you'll certainly be now that you're under the spotlight as president, you'll certainly be too ashamed to not accept our adjudication of your campaign finance violations along the way, and they fine you. Now, even under normal, quote-unquote, normal circumstances, a president says, golly, the rule of law is a big deal, and it would be extraordinarily embarrassing to say, screw law, I don't care, because then it would make it difficult to arrest other people, and so I'll pay the fine. And, of course, it was a joke anyway because the fines were too low. I don't know whether they're statutorily limited in how much they can fine anybody, but the numbers haven't kept up with modern campaign finance. Remember, we're talking about campaigns that raise in excess of $1 billion now. To fine them even $100,000 is nothing. In addition to which, even if they did fine them significantly, the president, especially if you win, right, the president can have a fundraiser and raise the money and then use that money to pay the fine. It's really a system destined to fail when it comes to keeping candidates honest because of the threat of later consequences. But even then, it's pretty rare for the FEC to come around and do this sort of thing. And there's never anything. Occasionally we hear stories from state law where they say things like, well, there was just such a big campaign law violation that you're removed from office. And you can do that in some states. But it's really rare, and it's the kind of thing that courts like to stay out of, and courts are loath to remove anybody that's been elected, even if the allegation is, well, they wouldn't have been elected if they had followed the law. This would never have been possible. Well, that's what you say. People can cast their ballot any way they want, and if they want to cast their ballot for a serial sexual abuser or somebody who's had sex with porn stars and is trying to cover it up with your money or whatever, then that's your business, and they can't invalidate that. And that exposes the ultimate weakness and truth of it is we just wrote laws where we just figured no one would ever run for office if they had that kind of skeleton in their closet. Or if they did, they knew that when the day came that it was exposed, it was all over. Fine, then I'll resign. And sometimes they don't care about the shame of all of it, but eventually they do go. And then now we have somebody who says, I'm not going to listen to you. You think I should resign over this, and I'm not going to. You think I absolutely can't. The politics of firing Mueller would be suicidal. I don't care. And not even worse if the person doesn't even want to stay in office. That only makes things worse. All right. I just wanted to sort of throw that observation, that thought out there. I'm sure you've had it too. And this article probably prompted it in you. There's more, and I better get started if I want to get back to it. Where we left off, here we are. was the last line she threw out. Trump then is like some classical Greek Shakespearean character who sent to reveal the weakness in the system. That has produced some nostalgia from all different sides for back before, when a political party might change the rules on a candidate, or the media could more tightly control what viewers saw and heard. But these are also the same kinds of institutional controls, remember Greg read us this, that made all Harvey Weinstein's accusers go away for so long. And that realization, the way institutions made bad things go away, links a lot of these kinds of stories. Smash the exterior of an institution, and you may reveal catacombs of cruelty, shame, sickness, all the terrible things people with power can do to those without it in the corridor of a hotel suite, inside an office, inside a home, in small places you feel as though you are not meant to be. This past year dropped floodlights into the biblical depths of human behavior. The way an obsession with control or some sadness within a person can curdle and warp in the dark of a professional, civilized society. And all for the righteous strength witnessed in and for all the righteous strength witnessed in and derived from the crack up of an open secret, each begins with a long suppressed anguish. That's the most horrible part of it. Lucia Evans told the New Yorker of Harvey Weinstein. People give up, and then they feel like it's their fault. If you read all these stories and start writing down or calculating out the ages of the people in them, the interns and assistants and desk assistants and students, especially the women and men, whose names you've never heard before, the pattern emerges. We also heard this from Greg. We were so young at the time. Karen Katz, who had worked at Weinstein's Miramax, told the Times, we did not understand how wrong it was, or how she should deal with it. Many of these stories concern people too inexperienced to know who to tell, or how, or when. I still, on some level, thought I had been a tiny adult. One man explained of how he did not appreciate until he was an adult the way, he says, Kevin Spacey abused him when he was 14. I assumed I was the problem for thinking badly of you, Ali Raisman said of Larry Nassar, the Olympic doctor, accused, of course, of abusing more than 100 girls. I wouldn't allow myself to believe that the problem was you. A robust institution can be isolating in that way. You can't identify patterns like those alone. You can suffer alone, questioning even your own story. You can also be the cool cynic, wise to the harsh ways of the world. Like this example, I felt a weird sense of pride about being able to handle the environment, wrote a colleague, only to realize in retrospect years later you were in over your head. I was like, look, man, I'm no effing fool, Asia Argento said of Harvey Weinstein. But looking back, I am an effing fool. And I am still trying to come to grips with what happened. The wild and unsettling thing about the last 6 months is both the pervasiveness of abuse and harassment, and what's at the heart of an open secret often turns out to be much worse. There is a sudden realization that maybe something terrible has been lurking beside you all along, because it's apparently at the ballet, on the manufacturing floor, inside the massage parlor, in jail, at the Olympics, on the morning TV show, at the theater, on the radio, on the court, on Capitol Hill. This is where you can end up wondering what the point of a civic institution even is. And on the most basic level, in the most amateur hour intro philosophy seminar way, isn't the idea that any one of these institutions, the church, the military, the government, the media, any of them, isn't it meant to give people a place and purpose and to judiciously amplify some virtue in men, and I assume she means mankind, strength or kindness or charity, or to bend our collective power toward some common benefit, safety or prosperity, and above all, Isn't the idea to blunt wickedness? This is the place at which her inherent conservatism becomes most apparent. And this is the apex of it. But here you have the agents who kept taking women to Weinstein. The studio that didn't look at his finances. Parts of the tabloid machine under his control. The way everybody seemed to know, and it's like a blood disease. Everything an institution is supposed to do, but corroded and turned on itself. More after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It's a depressing day. It's tough. We're learning a lot. We'll continue with Catherine Miller's piece here. Where we last left off, we were, of course, hearing her describe things and the corrosion of institutions, or rather, as she put it, everything an institution is supposed to do but corroded and turned in on itself. And there are so many other examples of it, not all of which have to do necessarily with sexual abuse, although who knows when that might come out. But I think back to some of the other shows that we did, I don't know, now we're like 2 years ago, on the FIFA corruption, and how weirdly connected that actually was to Trump world, since so many of the super ultra corrupt FIFA officials who were living in America, for some reason, ended up in Mos Eisley, that is a Trump tower, and were running their scams out of there. Who knows what they were leveraging out of people by way of the more traditional sexual abuse story that we were sort of talking about here. But just generally speaking, everything you pare down and peel back the layers of the onion and get into, everything turns out to be garbage. The FIFA, can I even escape into sport? Right? The simple enjoyment of the world's sport, soccer. Well, you can, except the actual location of the World Cup competition, if you care to go and attend and buy tickets, is a very carefully orchestrated scam, essentially, that you bribe FIFA officials into granting you so that you can make a killing on concessions and construction and everything else. We're about to enter into the Winter Olympics, which I guess is a good time to bring the focus back to people like Nasser. I hope he was never a doctor for any of the ski team or any of the Winter Olympians. But, just the current location of the Winter Olympics. Aren't they having the Winter Olympics somewhere in China where there's like literally it's not a winter place. It's not like a ski area. There's some mountains nearby and they sort of artificially made some snow, but it's apparently not, and this is like the third time in a row that the Winter Olympics have been located in a place where it's like, it's actually quite warm and mild here, but we are a essentially corrupt regime, and only corrupt regimes really are able to do the massive physical and social engineering necessary to turn a place that is otherwise entirely unsuited to hosting the Olympics, winter or summer, into a suitable venue by bulldozing, entire slums or knocking down buildings that don't look very, Olympic or whatever, and relocating entire populations or making snow where there isn't any, making mountains where there weren't any. Very disappointing on many levels. Okay, but back to the article, because I think we should get through this, and then maybe some other things too. It might be nice. So where were we? Again, then there's all of us. That's you and me. Consuming this weird year through our phones, living inside new institutions that are mind-blowing in scale and horribly ill-equipped for the task of handling us. Whatever it was that happened, the election, something has shifted in the way media, lawmakers, and even some people on them view the platforms. Facebook has grown so big and become so totalizing that we can't really grasp it all at once. Max Reed wrote last year, listing off a dozen different comparisons that platform has elicited, from the Catholic Church to a railroad company. Like a four-dimensional object, we catch slices of it when it passes through the three-dimensional world we recognize. Twitter, now in 34 languages and producing inconceivable numbers of words every second. And YouTube, in 88 countries with people watching 1 billion hours each day, operate in similar dimensions. Nobody can monitor that kind of volume, but algorithms can't quite either, and so all kinds of bad behavior can only belatedly be contained, if at all. And by the way, just observing on the side that very typically bad behavior unmonitored pretty much devolves to the most primitive evils you can think of very quickly. And lo and behold, it has in fact manifested itself that way. Human trafficking, etc., and all the attendant evils, and anything you can use internationally like this to just trade in this kind of contraband wherever the laws are loosest. And here we're all supposed to be saved somehow by the, I guess, privacy aspects. That was the idea of cryptocurrency, but instead, of course, it ends up facilitating just these sorts of transactions in the name of privacy. Just the same as, and there's an interesting parallel there in my mind between Larry Nassar and what he was doing, and saying, but it's medicine. It's okay. I'm your doctor. And, well, but you're trafficking in humans and selling drugs. I know, but it's privacy that we were really originally after. What people do with it, why, I'm a libertarian. So what people do with it, I don't care. It's not my business. And yet it kind of is. And just as Mark Zuckerberg grew up to find, this was only supposed to be, when we took it to market, open market, it was just supposed to be a fun thing where families and friends could share pictures with each other and talk about stuff that interested them, whether that was news or family business or whatever. Of course, that's ignoring the original start of the thing, which was, this is a way for dudes to creep on the women in their colleges and rate them without their knowledge and discuss them behind their backs. But then we put a more beneficent face on it when we went to wide market. But of course, then it becomes a worldwide platform for fake news and political manipulation as between nation states. And all, you could see why Mark Zuckerberg might have been caught by surprise on that one, just as he was probably caught by surprise when he found out, we really have to, patrol the neighborhood here and find out what people are posting. We have to keep an eye on it because, lo and behold, unmonitored, people will revert to the primitive. Anyway, YouTube was where we last left off. 88 countries watching 1 billion hours a day. Nobody can monitor this, and algorithms can't really do it either. YouTube will soon employ more than 10,000 people to screen videos and train algorithms to detect child exploitation, e.g., kids restrained with ropes or tape as a thing, a flag to look out for, and extremism like jihadi videos. That news preceded the 48 hours a now former YouTuber's video lived online featuring a dead man's body inside Japan's suicide forest. Twitter still struggles with the harassment, especially in places like India, where women are on the receiving end of harassment in 6 different local languages. In realms where political news gets delivered and consumed, the platform can feel constantly combative, meta, and wearing. The kind of this is an interesting comparison, I wouldn't have thought to say this, the kind of like a game of Hungry Hungry Hippos, where the hippos are outfitted with razors That might never have occurred to me. Facebook has found itself the host body for live shootings, dystopian authoritarian propaganda, and a philosophical debate about the meaning of news and truth in which a small move could result in shifting reality for someone. Kevin Roose compared an admission from Facebook leadership that they did not realize ad targeting, another one of these things that got turned upside down, ad targeting would be used to reach anti-Semites. To Victor Frankenstein's, once again Frankenstein, we'll say Frankenstein today, Victor Frankenstein's lament, I lived in daily fear lest the monster whom I had created should perpetuate some new wickedness, perpetrate rather, but perpetuate would be another bad thing to do with wickedness. But you get the idea. You've created a monster. And it caught them by surprise. They thought they were selling a fantastic new product. Imagine if you could micro-target to exactly the people you wanted and do it at a rate you could afford. Why, we'd make a mint. Yes. Well, imagine if the people you wanted to reach were people who are anti-Semitic, who don't want other people to find out that they're anti-Semitic. And what if you could do that with a political campaign? And you could say, Trump is your man. And I know you don't want people to know you're a vicious neo-Nazi, but we can keep it between ourselves because no one else is going to see this ad but you and other neo-Nazis. And, of course, other people who were had the foresight to pretend they were neo-Nazis so that they could sign up to see if they were getting any weird propaganda that the rest of the American people never got to see. Anyway, basically, the platforms are dealing with, A, the loftiest, most existential questions about information and speech, and B, every kind of domestic dispute in every small town across dozens of countries every hour of every day. And every response to these super old problems, rumors, lies, abuse, tends to be thin and unsatisfying, almost alien, from the endless vow to improve transparency to Facebook's intention to have 2 billion people decide the trustworthiness of news outlets. These are the products of a culture that sometimes views nearly all content as agnostic and everything else as a math problem. The underlying principle to these platforms isn't some huge mystery. Everything is keyed toward cascading reactions, an endless series of provocations, both good and bad. I wish I could guarantee that the positives are destined to outweigh the negatives, wrote Facebook's Samid Chakrabarti last week. But I can't. There's been a lot of talk over this first year of Trump about an abstract sense that things are falling apart, or that it's not the same country it used to be, or that this feels like the end of an era, even if what that era was cannot be so easily defined. This is, I think, partly a function of the way our phones intensify everything intellectually, in both good and bad ways, so that you can feel, within the space of minutes, a directionless jolt of anxiety at every Trump tweet about North Korea, and the immersive warmth of texting with exactly who you hope most to hear from. It is disorienting to know so much and to feel so much all the time. It is also a function of the reality where we get hit again and again and again with reminders that fundamental assumptions about the society we live in, that you can't say that you can't do that you couldn't have hid something like that, aren't really true. It's too difficult to keep a secret in 2018, especially about the bad things people can do to one another. So maybe it's political insecurity that's causing that static in the signal, or maybe it's disillusionment with these old, sick systems that kept sending people to Harvey Weinstein and Larry Nassar. Or maybe it's the sense that the platform are like big boxes that we've thrown the full crush of humanity into. Whatever it is, now we are free to tear apart every last institution until every last vestige of that kind of pain is gone, hurtling towards some new future where you can only hope the kindness in our hearts wins out. A little bit even unsatisfying in the conclusion, but where do you go with all that? I thought laid out a pretty good overview of what the problems we face really are and how large they are and how deeply we all feel them. Very interesting. I'm glad we spent the time with it, even though we can draw no final conclusion from it. but there's a lot to it. Okay, a couple of other things that I want to get to. Let's see. How shall we structure all of this? Over the weekend, of course, I watched as the rest of the world woke up to some very strange, what to me was strange news. Everyone sharing brand new news reports of stories that I felt like we had covered some time ago. And in fact, we had. So we had kind of a good weekend in that sense. There was a lot of it. There was the coverage of by CNN of, they had some video. This is, they tweeted out here, this May 2016 protest in Houston, Texas, it says, was organized by Russian trolls. The troll group promoted and organized two opposing events on Facebook to pit Americans against each other. And of course I said, well, gee whiz, that's actually something you heard on Kagro in the Morning some number of weeks ago. It really was weeks or maybe even months at this point ago. Then Amy Siskind tweeting, hey, here's why Ryan Zinke canceled the mining ban out in Minnesota. And quoting from a Washington Post story that says, Zinke met with proponents of Twin Metals Minnesota, a subsidiary of the Chilean firm, which belongs to the family of Andronico Luksic, who rents a Washington home to Ivanka and Jared Kushner. And I said, hey, you heard that weeks ago on Kagro in the Morning too. And then Kyle Griffin, who everybody turns to for their tweeted news, apparently, telling you AIVD, the intelligence organization in the Netherlands, apparently had previously hacked not only the Russians' computers, but also surveillance cameras inside their offices. These analysts could monitor the hackers' maneuvers inside U.S. networks and even collect closed-circuit television footage of the hackers involved. And I said, hey, you heard that on Friday on Kagro in the Morning. Damn, we do a good podcast. We do a pretty good job in keeping you guys up to date on what news is. And of course, we're not digging the news out. We're not reporting the news initially. We're not the sleuths that find these things. And I remind you, this is a good opportunity to remind everybody, although it's like getting the news early, it's just because I'm reading you the news that's already there. There are reporters reporting this stuff. We just find it, share. If at best we can say we have a pretty good eye for what's going to become more widely shared news in the next couple of days, and we like to give you an early in on it. But many of you have already read those articles by the time I read them anyway. You're so smart, you don't even need the newspaper. I just thought that was an interesting thing. Now, I do have, by way of segue, something else that I need to add to all of that. The American newspapers have, in fact, caught up with this. And so when I read you the story, from Der Volkskrant, right, was the name of the outlet I was reading, and I don't really know how to evaluate it in terms of trustworthiness when it comes to news. So, grain of salt and all that. And of course, it was difficult to be reading an article that had been translated. I didn't know how it had been translated, whether it was a human translation or an online algorithmic translation or what. But I wasn't sure that they were expressing things in exactly the right terms. So I was waiting for some American coverage of this, and it did come over the weekend. The Washington Post has a piece, Rick Noack, I guess is the name of the writer here. The Dutch were a secret U.S. ally in the war against Russian hackers, local media reveal. And they're not really secretly our allies, but they were secretly our hacking allies. I did see a lot of commentary online about, well, some people who were, let's say, opposed at least to the idea that the Dutch were doing what they say they were doing. For some reason, they have reason to doubt that. I don't see why the Dutch would be any less advanced in their anti-hacking or computer security technology than the United States. But there's been a lot of doubt expressed. And as much as I would like to read through for you the Washington Post writing on it so that we can get a clear view of at least how the slightly more skeptical news eyes, I assume, at the editorial desks at the Washington Post view this versus how I did. I think it might be better use of our time to go to the hedge on this. And I had suggested to me by Pat Connors, who is a listener to the podcast of the show, said you should really take a look at this with an eye towards tempering, I guess, the Dutch revelations, as he says, on Friday's show. And let's see. We've got, he sent me to an article, or actually a tweet from Caitlin Johnstone, who tweets as Kate OZ, Kate Oz, C-A-I-T-O-Z. Very skeptical of the story. She describes herself in her bio as a rogue journalist, poet, and utopia prepper. You will disagree with me sometimes. That's okay. And I'm glad it is okay because I do disagree. She wrote up a very provocative article, by the way, titled Russiagate Isn't About Trump and It Isn't Even Ultimately About Russia. This in a outlet called Steemit.com, STEEMIT.com, which actually looks like a kind of an interesting concept of an outlet that I think might be one of the first that actually perhaps facilitates some micropayments to their writers from readers. But she put out a very, well, she's a Trump-Russia cynic, and there are many of them out there. And I would say, I read over her article, and I'll refer you to it, and you can read it and evaluate it for yourself. I thought she maybe swung the pendulum a little too far past center over in her own direction, too. But that's just habit. We are dealing with a very weird phenomenon here, and I don't know whether the answer might not, in fact, lie on one of the extremes. If you define the center as maybe none of this happened, which I don't think is really a very centrist point of view right now, but that's one of the troubles that we're constantly facing, trying to find center on all this. But in her article, with the bulk of which I disagreed with, I disagree. I don't know. Well, you structure that how you like it. There were some references to some tweets and some related articles from Max Blumenthal. Another, I think we would have to count him as a Trump-Russia skeptic as well, which I thought were well worth repeating and adding to our mix for some skeptical thought about Russia that I think probably they ring true and I think could help us perhaps evaluate things with a little bit more clarity. I'll get right to this. Blumenthal tweeted, this is from, it's a recent tweet, January 26th, in response to Natasha Bertrand's tweet, which first brought my attention to this story about the AIVD having hacked Cozy Bear. You remember that terminology. And he observes, Cozy Bear is not a network of hackers. I mean, that's how it's been explained to us, right? That there's Cozy Bear and there's Fancy Bear, and one is more connected to the Russian government than the other one is, but they're both hacker groups or whatever. An interesting way, a valuable, perhaps, starting place for evaluating what is going on. And, one of the problems wrapped up in all of this is, what is the Russian government? What constitutes Russian government? What is outside the Russian government? Very few of the actors in this weird scene we have here between ourselves and Russia and maybe the Trump organization and maybe even China, if we accept Caitlin's proposal. And there's some truth to that, too. That's the other best part about it, is that don't take your eye off China and all this. You'll be able to pick up the connection on your own if you read the piece. We can't do it today, but maybe tomorrow is another day to pick back up on this. But here's Max's most important point. Cozy Bear, that's not what they call themselves. Fancy Bear, Cozy Bear, those guys, if you thought for a moment, I must go to work at Cozy Bear, that's not happening. Cozy Bear is not a network of hackers. He explains it's a Russian-sounding name for the for-profit firm here in the United States, I guess, right? CrowdStrike, the cybersecurity outfit, right? It's a Russian-sounding name, Cozy Bear, for that CrowdStrike assigned to an APT, which isn't really a thing or entity either, but is explained later in the tweet thread, is an advanced persistent threat. In other words, something that antivirus programmers and computer security people say, all right, well, there's this category of threat out there, and it has to do with hacking, but this is just hacking that's coming from Russia. There might not be any place like, let's go to the Cozy Bear Clubhouse. But they clearly did have a place if we believe the AIVD story in Volkskrant. But here's Max's point here. Okay, so it's a name that CrowdStrike gave to this particular threat to market its findings to gullible reporters, and probably clients, of course, desperate for Russiagate scoops. Well, okay, I don't really sit in that camp, but I can absolutely accept the idea that, yeah, maybe CrowdStrike needed to put these labels on things so that they could talk to potential clients, and they do speak to potential clients through the news media by getting themselves quoted as experts at explaining these things. And then if you have a problem with hackers, whether they're Russian or otherwise, you might say, let's call CrowdStrike. They seem to have a handle on what's going on here based on what I read on the Washington Post today. It doesn't even have to be, you don't have to adopt Blumenthal's, the entirety of his Russiagate skepticism in order to see some value here. He continues and says, and here's yet another bombshell sourced, as usual, to a few anonymous spooks. That would be the AIVD story that Natasha referred us to. Max then tweets, since CrowdStrike attributed the DNC hacks to Russian intelligence, marketing its findings to clueless journalists with clever APT names like Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear, its valuation, that is CrowdStrike's corporate valuation, has shot up to a whopping $1 billion. Although, again, on the other hand, in the information technology sector, it is not hard and is not uncommon to be able to shoot your valuation up to a whopping $1 billion based on nothing. We very often call that just sharp business practice if you happen to be marketing something otherwise benign, though I have no doubt that Max Blumenthal would have legitimate criticisms of that practice as well. And he includes in here a link to a Fortune.com article. The cybersecurity firm that investigated the DNC hack just reached, $1 billion in valuation. They landed $100 million in funding, and that's how you figure these things out. Max continues, and we'll just cram in just a little bit more before we make our exit for the day. Here's how CrowdStrike's marketing tactics work and how they routinely deceive the media via Yasha Levine and Jeffrey Carr at the Baffler. And he grabs this quote from that article, which I'll also round up for you. The flimsiness of this evidence didn't stop CrowdStrike. What evidence? It should probably become clear from context. Its analysts matched some of the tools and methods used in the DNC hack to APT-28 and APT-29. Again, Advanced Persistent Threat, 28 and 29. We don't know what these are. We know approximately where they're coming from and what methods they're using, but we don't know what to call them. Well, they slapped a couple of Russian-sounding names with bear in them on their report and claimed that the FSB and GRU did it. That might be true. That might not be true. I don't know, but that's the claim. And most journalists covering this beat ate it all up without gagging. And, of course, now there's considerably, I think, more reason to do so and not feel embarrassed about it at all. You don't know there is anybody there. It's not like it's a club and everyone has a membership card that says Fancy Bear on it. It's just a made-up name for a group of attacks and techniques that... why is my music not running here? There we go. I knew it would come up if I hit the right buttons 11 times. You don't know if there's anybody there. It's not like there's a club and everybody's got a membership card. It's just a made-up name for a group of attacks and techniques and technical indicators associated with these attacks. Author and cybersecurity expert Jeffrey Carr told me, there is rarely, if ever, any confirmation that these groups even exist or that the claim was proven as correct. And, of course, other people attacking on the same grounds and saying maybe it doesn't even really sound all that Russian anyway. But you could see why they would hang those names on them. And you could see why, but you could also see why you might believe that there was an organized group of some kind behind it. And there's not any, maybe there was at the time a lack of information that would indicate that it was an organized group organized by some governmental entity. But again, only the United States in all this group of actors really pretends that they have and persists in pretending that they have a serious separation between the private sector, what we call our private sector, and the government. And in Russia and China and all these other suspect lands that we may or may not be at cyber war with, they just don't do that. So I don't know. They're not playing by our rules and we're not playing by theirs. But a good point, nonetheless, in pointing out that this may be a marketing tactic more than anything else.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, there can be very little doubt that the stories on today's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy will be very different from the ones we covered today. And one of the more important and interesting ones, I don't know if I can say important, but interesting and weird, was the story of Chef Jose Andres being kicked out of a restaurant. Stay tuned to find out about that one if you haven't heard already. We'll be back tomorrow.